turned family dinners into deadly affairs. From the 1920s to the 1950s, Nannie Doss poisoned 11 family members, including 4 husbands, 2 children, her mother and 2 sisters. Charming and soft-spoken, Doss hid her deadly crimes behind an innocent smile. She confessed laughing after being caught poisoning her 5th husband. Her motive? Insurance payouts and a twisted sense of revenge. Sentenced to life in prison, she became one of America's most infamous female serial killers. A deadly smile and 11 lives lost. Nannie Doss's story reminds us that not all killers hide in the shadows. Follow for more infamous prison stories.
Have you ever heard of Nannie Doss or the giggling Nanny? Nannie was born in 1905 in Blue Mountain, Alabama. She wouldn't go to school, instead she would work on her family farm. When she was 7 years old, she suffered a head injury and her father was very abusive. Nannie would often read romance magazines, and it's believed that she did this to escape the reality of her home. When Nannie was 16, she would marry Charlie Bragg. They had 4 children together, and 2 of those children would die mysteriously. Charlie and Nannie divorced in 1927. Her ex-husband would take their oldest daughter and leave the newborn baby with her. A year after that divorce, Nannie would marry Frank Harrelson. They met in a Lonely Hearts column. Frank was an alcoholic. He was also very abusive. During this marriage, Nannie would murder her newborn granddaughter. A short while later, her grandson died of asphyxiation while he was in her care. In 1945, Nannie would mix a special drink for Frank, and he died. Doctors would chalk it up to food poisoning, and nothing more was thought of it. Nannie would place another ad in a Lonely Hearts column, and that led her to Arlie Lanning. He would die of what they thought was a heart attack, but he was a heavy drinker, so doctors didn't think much of it either. Nannie had poisoned him as well. Nannie would then meet Richard Morton. Nannie was taking care of her mother at the time, and while she was doing that, Richard would cheat on her frequently. But it wouldn't take long for Nannie's mother and her sister to die under mysterious circumstances. When Nannie returned home, she realized that Richard was cheating on her. Didn't take long for him to die either. Nannie's last victim would be Samuel Doss. He told Nannie that she could only watch educational TV shows and read educational magazines. I guess this upset her because she poisoned him too. But this time doctors would do an autopsy. They found large amounts of arsenic in his system. Nannie confessed to killing 4 of her 5 husbands. Every time she talked about the murder, she would giggle. Hence the name Giggling Nannie. She claims she killed to find the perfect mate. Nannie was sentenced to life in prison, but died in 1964 while she was serving that sentence. So what are your thoughts? Do you think the perfect mate exists? Leave it in the comments, and follow for more true crime.
Welcome back to Female Murderer TikTok. This one's about Nannie Doss. Buckle up. Nannie and her husband had 4 kids. 2 of them died back-to-back from poisonings. The husband was like, something ain't right, and then he took the kids and left. So Nannie gets remarried, kills him, buys a house and land with the insurance money, and is like, oh, I like this. She reunites with her daughter. Her daughter's like, hey, can you watch my baby for a little bit? And she's like, totally. And then the baby dies in like 3 days. And then it starts to get lethal. She marries her 3rd husband. He dies that year. Her mom breaks her hip and she's like, I'll take care of you. She's dead. Both of her sisters die in the same year in different towns, all while Nannie's visiting. She marries her 4th husband. He doesn't even make it a few months. Then she marries her 5th husband. He dies a month later. But finally, in that autopsy, they were like, there's a lot of rat poison in this guy. Did you do this? And then Nannie goes, yeah, I did that to all of them. So she gets life in prison, and before she dies, they interview her, and they're like, why did you do it? Was it for the money? And she goes, money? I was bored.
Starting with Alabama. The most notorious serial killer is Nannie Doss. She was a serial killer and poisoner who poisoned her family for insurance money. Her first victims were her own children. Her first husband found them laying on the floor in 1920. She claimed it was an accidental poisoning. From that point on, many relatives and husbands died of stomach problems. Finally, one of the doctors wasn't convinced that it was an accidental poisoning, and he finally ordered an autopsy. This is when massive amounts of arsenic were found in her 5th husband's system. The bodies of all of her ex-husbands, her relatives, and children were exhumed to be tested. After arsenic was found in all of their systems, she was sentenced to life in prison. She ended up getting leukemia, and 10 years later, she died.
I am Nannie Doss. Between the 1920s and 1954s, I committed the heinous act of taking the lives of 11 people, including 4 of my husbands, 2 children, 2 sisters and my mother. I was known as the giggling granny. My primary method of murder was rat poison. I cannot deny the facts. I have been convicted and accepted my guilt before the law. I was sentenced to life imprisonment for my crimes.
Hey TikTok, brace yourselves for a spine-chilling story about Nannie Doss, a woman whose sinister actions earned her the title of the Giggling Granny. Born in 1905, Nannie's outwardly sweet demeanor masked a dark and deadly secret. Nannie's life was marked by tumultuous relationships and multiple marriages. Tragically, those close to her often met mysterious and untimely ends. Her husbands, children, and other family members became victims of her murderous intentions. Nannie's weapon of choice was arsenic, a tasteless and odorless poison. She laced food and drinks with the deadly substance, leaving a trail of unsuspecting victims. Her motivations ranged from insurance payouts to the desire for a fresh start with a new husband. As the body count rose, suspicions grew. Authorities began to connect the dots, leading to Nannie's arrest in 1954. During questioning, she showed little remorse, earning her the chilling nickname Giggling Granny due to her seemingly carefree attitude about the murders. Nannie eventually confessed to murdering multiple family members over the span of several decades. In 1955, she was sentenced to life in prison, avoiding the death penalty. The legacy of Nannie Doss, the seemingly harmless grandmother turned serial killer, remains a haunting chapter in true crime history. That wraps up the story of Nannie Doss. If you found this tale intriguing, don't forget to like and share. Stay tuned for more true crime.
I am a giggling grandmother, and you won't believe what all the fuss is about. My name is Nannie Doss, known better as the Giggling Granny. I was born in 1905 in Alabama and had a controlling father. No makeup or fun was allowed at my house, and daydreaming of adventure and romance occupied my mind. At 16, I married my first husband, and we eventually divorced. I went on to marry 4 more times, and none of my other husbands would survive. Over the next 30 years, I would end the lives of 4 of my husbands, 1 mother-in-law, my sister, and 2 of my grandchildren. To commit these crimes, I typically used poison and even used a hat pin on my infant grandson. Eventually, I was caught after my 5th husband's autopsy contained a large amount of poison. I was promptly arrested and confessed to the killings, receiving life without the possibility of parole. I passed away in prison at 59. Now in the afterlife, I look back on my crimes. For some reason, they made me laugh and provided the adventure and joy I lacked as a child.